Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Tonight, we're rolling patrol deep into the heart of Texas, a land where the highways stretch forever, but the real darkness hides in the alleys, back roads, and old jails. This isn't just any horror. These are true Texas police horror stories, tales heard in squad cars and whispered in the locker rooms, where the line between duty and dread gets blurred. From ghostly radio chatter to restless spirits haunting prison cells, these are the stories that make even the toughest officers check over their shoulder twice. So buckle up, because tonight you're riding shotgun on 10 of the most disturbing, real-life police encounters Texas has ever seen. But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake. They leave without subscribing, and by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. So, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started, and the horror is waiting to unfold. Now, let's dive into the darkness. Tom Delaney had been working night patrols for years by the time the call came through. The kind of nights that felt like they were underwater, quiet, slow, a little warped around the edges. He was the guy they stuck on the late shift because he never complained, never showed up drunk, never raised his voice, just drove his beat in his old black and white Crown Vic, with the heater wheezing like an asthmatic dog and the radio crackling now and then, like a ghost trying to cough up words. He liked the night. Always had. Something about the way the city settled after midnight made it easier to think, easier to breathe. Houston's heartbeat slowed down after 2 a.m., like it was catching its breath before another day. But the dark had a way of remembering things the daylight tried to forget. It was a Tuesday in October. He remembers that much. A cold front had rolled in and the air smelled like wet leaves and diesel fumes. Tom had just passed through the 4th Ward, where the old houses still slouched under rotting porches and power lines buzzed like they were holding in a secret. That's when it came through. The radio gave a small crackle. Not the usual garble of dispatch or routine checks, but something older, dustier, like it had been buried under years of silence. 1007. Officer down. 3101 Ashland Street. All units respond. Tom stared at the radio. His hands didn't move. Channel 13 hadn't been active in over a decade. It was one of the old analog bands, phased out back in the mid-80s when the department upgraded. Everyone knew it was dead. Hell, half the younger cops probably didn't even know it existed. And that address, 3101 Ashland, hadn't existed since 1976. It had been a duplex, a squat little brown brick box of a house out near the Heights, burned down on Halloween night, if the old-timers were to be believed. A noise complaint turned tragic. A rookie cop went inside to investigate and never came back out. His name was Eric Collins, fresh out of the academy, 23 years old. His radio went dead during the call. The fire started 5 minutes later. Nobody knew what caused it. The department buried the story, like it tends to do when something doesn't fit right. Tom didn't believe in ghosts. Not really. But that night, something in the voice, too clean, too clear, settled into the base of his skull like a cold wire being threaded into his spine. He keyed the mic slowly. Dispatch, say again. Did you catch that? Got something on 13? There was silence. Then a younger voice, some new kid from Central, answered, Negative. Channel 13's inactive, Delaney. You okay? He didn't answer. He was already turning onto the freeway. The drive out to Ashland and Grayson was quiet. Quieter than it should have been. No dogs barking, no traffic, not even the drunk stumbling out of a taqueria. It felt like the whole city had taken one long breath and was holding it. The lot where 3101 used to sit was empty. Not just abandoned, empty. Like the house had never been there at all. Just a cracked concrete foundation and the skeletal remains of what might have once been a porch, A rusted fire hydrant sat at the corner, leaning like it was tired. Tom parked and stepped out. The cold hit him in the face like a slap. He looked around, hand resting on the grip of his service weapon. The Crown Vic's headlights washed over, the lot in a wide arc, catching nothing but broken glass and a few wind-tangled bushes. Then the radio crackled again. 10-07, officer down. 3101 Ashland. Repeat, officer down. The voice was calm. Female, and this time it said his name. Delaney. His legs went cold. Not from fear, not at first. More like his blood had decided to turn to slush. He looked down at the radio. Then, the air changed. It wasn't the kind of change you can see, really. It was more like the atmosphere pulled tight, like a drumhead stretched to the breaking point. He stepped forward, onto the lot. The concrete crunched under his boots. Then the world shifted. It was still dark, but not night anymore. The streetlights were gone. The sound of distant cars vanished. The stars above blinked out one by one like someone had turned off a switchboard, and in the distance, from where the back wall of the old duplex once stood, came the faintest sound of static. Not from the radio this time, from the air, like the lot itself was breathing static. A soft voice behind him now whispered, 10:07. He spun around. Nothing. But the air was colder now. Not Houston cold. Not autumn cold, but underground cold. The kind of cold that lives in places with no sunlight. He backed up, heart thudding hard in his chest, the radio buzzing faintly in the cruiser behind him. Then something moved near the hydrant, just a flicker, like a person stepping out from behind a curtain of heat. Except it wasn't hot. It was a man, in uniform, young, face smeared with ash, wide eyes, Eric Collins, but it wasn't him, not really. Tom felt his knees go slack as the figure raised its radio to its mouth. Then, Delaney, 10:07, officer down. That's the last thing he remembered. When another unit found him hours later, Tom was curled up on the cracked pavement, clutching the radio like it was a lifeline. His mouth was open, and his lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. He didn't speak again for 6 months. They put him on medical leave. The department doctor diagnosed him with a stress-induced dissociative episode. He wouldn't talk to anyone, not his partner, not the captain, not even his sister, who flew in from Dallas to see him. Until one afternoon in April, when the department chaplain visited. Tom looked up, eyes sunken like old wells, and said a single sentence. She said she had one more call to make. Then he went silent again. Tom Delaney retired quietly that year, moved up to a cabin outside Livingston. No phone, no TV. Just a shortwave radio he kept unplugged in the back of his closet. But every once in a while, late at night, new officers on patrol report something strange. An old female dispatcher's voice. Calm, cold, coming in on a frequency nobody uses anymore. 10:07, officer down. 3101 Ashland Street. Repeat, officer down. And if they listen long enough, the voice always says the same name, Tom Delaney, as if the call never really ended, as if it's still waiting for someone to answer. They don't talk about Cell 6 in the daytime, not in the break room, not on paperwork, not even when a new CO shows up fresh from training with bright eyes and a stiff uniform, trying to make friends. It's like the cell doesn't exist until the lights go out. Huntsville State Penitentiary is old, built with thick limestone and harder intentions, been standing since before the Civil War, older than the bones buried in its yard, older than the nightmares it holds tight behind locked doors and yellowed brick. It hums with the kind of silence that only comes from generations of suffering, and buried deep in the East Wing, the one that's not open to inmates anymore, is Cell 6. Back in the 80s, that wing handled overflow from death row. There were too many men waiting to die and not enough space to hold them. So the East Wing, already condemned once due to faulty wiring and poor ventilation, got reactivated with a few fresh locks and a heavy coat of state-approved paint. They stuck them in there like extra furniture, men with numbers on their chests and expiration dates printed in ink across their files. And that's where the screaming started. At first, they thought it was just the wind. That's what the warden said anyway. The windows were warped, some broken, and the breeze slipped through like a thief at night. But wind doesn't scream words, and it sure as hell doesn't say names. The first time it happened was October 1991. A graveyard shift guard named Wallace heard it, high-pitched, ragged, like it was coming from the bottom of a well filled with broken glass. He made the mistake of checking it out alone. He followed the sound to cell 6, flashlight in hand, boots echoing on the concrete. He keyed open the old lock and swung the door inward. And there he was, a man, sitting cross-legged on the cot, wearing a tattered white jumpsuit with the number half ripped off, pale, thin, staring straight ahead like a corpse waiting for instructions. In his lap was a noose, homemade, torn from bedsheets and twisted with maddening patience. He was whispering. Wallace stepped in and snapped on the overhead light. But it only flickered, then died. The flashlight beam caught the man's face, gray skin, dry lips, eyes wide open but wrong somehow, like they weren't meant to see anymore. Wallace stumbled backward. "Sir, you're not supposed to be in here." The whispering stopped. The man looked up, and then he smiled. Wallace ran, didn't even lock the door behind him. He went straight to the control booth. When they pulled the footage, nothing showed up. Just a blank cell. No man, no cot. Just peeling walls and empty silence. Wallace never worked another night shift again. They tried everything after that. Swapped out the camera, new wiring. Even brought in a priest once. Though no one talks about what happened to him, but the screams kept coming. Always between 3:15 and 3:30 a.m. Always from cell 6, and every time. Someone went to look. It was the same. The man with the noose. Same position, same whispering. Always alone, always silent the second a light touched him. They stopped, assigning guards to the east wing, started locking the hallway off entirely. Let it rot, but the screaming never stopped. Sometimes it's low, moaning, like someone trying not to die. Other times, it's loud enough to shake the damn wall. One guard, McCrae, swears he saw the concrete pulse, like it was breathing, like the cell itself had lungs. He quit 2 weeks later, moved to Utah, never gave a reason. The story goes, the real story, is that the man in the cell was once an inmate named Ray Benford. He wasn't famous. Not a serial killer, not a monster, just a guy who cracked one day, snapped a neck that wasn't his to snap. They say he didn't even cry during sentencing. They tossed him in the East Wing when the main death row unit overflowed. He made the noose on his 3rd day, used it on the 4th. But when the guards found him, the noose was in his lap, not around his neck. He was sitting just like the vision, cross-legged, eyes wide, whispering to no one. No heartbeat, no pulse, dead as dirt. No sign of struggle. Just a smile on his face, like someone had finally whispered something nice back. The coroner couldn't explain it. Cause of death was listed as cardiac failure, brought on by extreme psychological distress. Whatever he saw in that cell, it broke something inside him. And it stayed there. Now, some say he's still whispering, still trying to finish that last thought. Others say it ain't him doing the screaming at all, that it's someone else, trapped in the same moment, over and over again. A scream that echoes because it was never heard the first time. There's no video, no audio recordings that work, just the sound, just the story. Passed around the prison like an infection, whispered behind hands and over cheap coffee at 4 a.m., and always ending the same way. You ever hear screaming from cell 6, the old-timers say, you don't go down there, not unless you want to see him, not unless you want to hear what he's saying. Because whatever he's whispering, whatever's got him smiling in the dark, it's not meant for the living. And the moment you understand it, you'll scream too. There are places in Texas where God doesn't look anymore. Too many bad things have happened there. and too many people pretend not to see them. The land just closes its eyes, lets the sun keep cooking whatever's left, and waits for more bones to bleach. That patch of mesquite scrub west of Laredo, just a few miles from the Rio Grande, is one of those places. Deputy Raul Esquivel never used to believe in any of that. He was a straightforward man, former Marine, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, came back with a Purple Heart and a drinking problem he beat cold. Solid on the job, never showed fear, never told ghost stories or got superstitious like some of the older deputies. People trusted him because he was calm, careful, and grounded in things you could touch and prove. But after that night in 2012, Raul never went back to being the same man again. It started around 9:42 p.m. on a Wednesday. Late summer, heat still, hanging in the air like smoke. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the dying light made everything glow red and gold. Raul was patrolling solo that night, windows down, letting the desert wind slap him awake. He just wrapped up a trespassing call at an abandoned trailer park near Highway 359 and was about to turn back toward the station when he heard it. A child's voice, crying, faint but clear, coming from the brush. The kind of sound that doesn't belong out there, especially not after dark. Raul stopped the cruiser, turned off the engine, sat still listening. There it was again, closer now. A boy's voice, not screaming, not panicking, just sobbing, soft, shaky, like someone trying very hard not to be heard. He radioed it in. Standard procedure. Dispatch, I think I've got a lost child in the brush off mile marker 212. Requesting backup, but I'm going to go in and check it out now. Copy? Copy 3-2, the dispatcher replied. Unit 4 is en route. ETA, 14 minutes. Raul grabbed his flashlight and stepped out. His body cam caught the first part just fine. The crunch of his boots on gravel. The beam of light sweeping across a narrow cattle gate long since rusted shut. The dry scrape of mesquite branches as he pushed through them. Then it cut out. Clean. Timestamp, 9:46 p.m. The footage went black for exactly 23 minutes and 18 seconds. No sound, no static, just void. Not even that telltale body cam glitch where you get digital snow or frame tearing. It was like someone reached in and hit pause on the world. When the feed resumed, it was chaos. The camera flickered, blinked twice, and came back to a shot of the ground, shaky, tilted, and covered in dust. Raul was breathing hard, real hard, hyperventilating. You could hear him muttering something just below the mic's range, too soft to make out at first. Then he spoke louder, clear. Too many eyes, too many eyes, too many eyes. That was all he said, over and over and over. He stumbled back toward the road, barefoot, shirt torn at the shoulder, face pale like bone. His gun was still holstered, untouched, but his flashlight was gone. So were his boots and socks. His belt was twisted, like it had been yanked from behind by someone or something with real strength. They found him just before 10:10 p.m., 20 yards from the road, swaying like a drunk. His hands shook so badly he couldn't hold onto the bottle of water they gave him. Took 3 deputies to get him into the cruiser. He kept whispering, even in the back seat. Too many eyes. Too many eyes. Raul didn't speak another real sentence for 6 weeks, and even then, when he finally did, he wouldn't say what he saw, not to the department psychiatrist, not to his partner, not to his wife, not even in church. He'd just shake his head and say, "It's still out there," and lock all the doors, windows, and draw the blinds, even during the day. But here's what came after. The search team went out early the next morning. 4 deputies, 2 dogs, and a couple of local volunteers. They found Raul's flashlight wedged into the fork of a mesquite tree about 10 feet off the ground, like it had been tossed there. His boots were 10 yards apart, soles up, both pointed toward the brush instead of away from it. And then they found the prints. Not shoe prints, not bare feet either. These were long impressions in the dirt, almost like someone had been crawling, except elbows don't normally bend that way. The spacing was off, too far apart. too symmetrical and whatever. Left them didn't bleed, but there was something else there, something worse. A smell. One of the deputies, Rosa Martinez, a tough-as-nails woman who'd worked cartel cases without flinching, threw up in her mouth when she caught it. It wasn't decay. It wasn't rot. It was old copper, scorched meat, and that stink you get from a snake cage when it hasn't been cleaned in weeks. They snapped photos, sent them to state. Someone from Austin came down 3 days later, wore a gray suit, didn't introduce himself, didn't share a badge number. He reviewed the footage, collected all the body cam data, and told the station it was a malfunction. Technical issue. A data error. Case closed. Raul resigned quietly a few months later, packed up, sold his house, and moved to northern Idaho. Lives on a private plot with 6 motion sensor lights and no phone line. The few people who've tracked him down say he doesn't talk much, but he sleeps with the lights on and keeps a gun on every windowsill. Now, here's where it gets even weirder. 3 years after Raul's incident, 2015, a Border Patrol agent named Colin Fisher reported hearing the same thing. A child crying in the brush. He didn't go in. Not all the way. Said he took 2 steps into the mesquite and got hit with something like vertigo. His nose started bleeding. He backed out fast and called it in. Said the air felt thick, like breathing through syrup, and that the crying had stopped instantly, the moment he turned his flashlight toward the sound. When his supervisor asked why he didn't investigate further, Colin just said, "I've heard coyotes, I've heard owls. That wasn't either, and I know what a kid sounds like, but this wasn't a kid. It just sounded like one. Like something wearing a kid's voice." People in Laredo still whisper about the thing in the mesquite. They say it's not human, but not animal either. Some folks claim it's ancient, older than the land. Maybe something that slithered up from the rivers long before people came. Some say it's connected to the land itself, a curse or a punishment, but no one agrees on what it looks like. Just that it has eyes. Too many eyes. Sometimes glowing, sometimes blinking. Always watching, so if you're ever driving down 359 at night and you hear crying from the brush near mile marker 212, don't stop. Not even for a child. Because whatever's out there, it remembers Raul Esquivel, and it's still hungry. It started like most Amarillo stories do, on a flat stretch of nowhere, under a sky the color of bruised steel, with wind whispering secrets through chain-link fences and dry wheat fields. In late spring of 2003, Amarillo PD had been dealing with a rash of strange call-ins, misrouted patrols, crossed radio chatter, reports of backup being sent that nobody ever requested. Minor glitches, they said at first. Technical interference. Nothing to sweat. The department blamed sunspots or tower static. You know how small-town brass gets when technology starts throwing curveballs. Tighten up the logs, double-check your call signs, and move on. But then, the voice showed up. Calm, professional, female. A little older-sounding, maybe late 30s, with a soft Amarillo drawl that wrapped around words like 1019 and proceed to location, like she'd been doing it her whole life. Crystal clear, no background noise. Not the usual dispatcher chatter with coffee mugs clinking or phones ringing, just her, like she was sitting in a sealed room made of silence, and she was sending people places they shouldn't have been going. The first officer who said something was Patrolman John Ramirez. He was rerouted during a quiet Friday night loop to check on what he was told was an urgent 1070, a fire at an abandoned farmhouse east of Route 287. Only problem? There was no fire, no smoke, no lights, no fire crews, just a house with its guts long since ripped out by time and scavengers, caved-in roof, rotting porch, empty windows like eye sockets. John called it in, confused. Dispatch told him they hadn't sent him there. In fact, they'd had no 1070s all night. When he gave them the badge number of the dispatcher who rerouted him, badge 298, they went quiet. Real quiet. You know that kind of silence that gets thick, like someone just died in the room? Badge 298 had belonged to Pamela Reese. She died in 1987, murdered during a night shift at the old dispatch center on Polk Street. Everyone in Amarillo PD knew the story, but they didn't talk about it much. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was ugly. A junkie with a grudge against the department managed to sneak in through the back lot. Slipped through a door. That should have been locked. Found Pamela alone, finishing up her shift, drinking a Diet Coke, and going over paper logs. He stabbed her 13 times with a broken screwdriver, left her to bleed out under the blue glow of the switchboard lights. Tachuma. Guy tried to flee to Mexico, but he didn't make it far. Shot dead by highway patrol outside of Pecos. Justice, sure, but too late for Pamela. After that, the department updated their security and moved dispatch to a newer building uptown. Her badge was retired, her desk cleared, her radio line permanently decommissioned. But in May 2003, that voice was back, and she was working shifts again. Over the next 2 weeks, no less than 7 different patrol officers reported being rerouted by a woman who identified herself as Dispatcher 298. Each time she gave proper call-ins. Clear, calm, no panic, like muscle memory from another life. She never yelled, never hesitated, but the places she sent them, empty houses, dead ends, deserted crossroads, and always cold. Not weather cold, bone-deep cold. The kind that seeps under your skin, even if it's 80 degrees out. One officer, Lena Holbrook, said her breath fogged up like it was January when she stepped out of her cruiser to investigate one of these calls. She claimed the shadows didn't move right in that neighborhood, that they leaned the wrong way. But the most disturbing thing? Every time they tried to call her back, she was gone. No recording, no trace on the logs, like the radio had been talking to itself. That's when Sergeant Miller got involved. Old school cop, Vietnam vet, never rattled by much. He ordered a deep audit of the department's comms, pulled the tapes, dug into all the badge numbers. He didn't believe in ghosts or glitches or things that go bump on frequency 450.050. Until he heard her. May 23rd, 11:37 p.m., Officer Drew Carson requested routine backup for a possible trespasser at the old water tower near the fairgrounds. Before dispatch could respond, a voice cut in. Her voice. Unit 7, cancel backup. Proceed solo. Suspect is nonviolent. I'll stay on your line. Miller played that recording 3 times in a row in the operations room. And then he walked out. Never said a word. He retired 2 weeks later. The official explanation? Glitch. Cross-frequency bleed from a nearby tower. But that doesn't explain how she knew the exact location. The call codes, officer names, their routes, their lives. Because Pamela Reese hadn't just been any dispatcher. She had worked for almost 11 years, knew every officer by voice, tracked their birthdays, sent birthday cards, baked pies. She was the kind of person the job forgot once she was gone. But she never forgot the job. And maybe that's the scariest part. She still doesn't. There hasn't been a confirmed incident since 2006, but some Amarillo officers say she still shows up once in a while. Usually late at night, always alone, just a voice on the wire. Calm, steady, familiar. Like a mother's voice in a storm. They say if you hear her, you better listen, because she never speaks by accident. And whatever she's trying to warn you about, you don't want to meet it. There's a stretch of asphalt out in South Texas that folks around the border towns don't like talking about much. It's not on most maps, and even when it is, it seems to shimmer just a little wrong on the screen, like a dirty smudge under glass. Locals call it the Road to Nowhere, though officially it's listed as Farm to Market Road 666. Yes, that's the real number. They didn't make that up. FM 666 cuts through a forgotten part of Nueces County, winding like a black snake through dry ranch land, where the mesquite trees lean just a little too close to the edge of the road. And every so often something happens out there. Something The brass upstairs likes to write off as heat stroke or exhaustion, or, in the worst cases, delusion brought on by prolonged exposure to the elements, but that's not what happened to Officer James Rivas. Rivas had been with the county sheriff's department for 12 years. Solid man, church-going, no record of psychological issues. The kind of guy who kept his patrol car clean and his boots shined. On August 14, 2017, he was dispatched to a broken-down vehicle reported on FM 666 near mile marker 46. Caller said a black sedan had been sitting there since early afternoon. Door wide open, hazards dead, and nobody around. Routine welfare check. Should have taken 30 minutes. Rivas didn't return for 8 hours. The thing is, his radio went dark just after he called in that he'd reached the location. 10:23. Got the vehicle in sight. No occupants. I'll take a look. That was at 4:07 p.m. After that, nothing. No static. No background noise. Just silence. They pinged his GPS, but it was all over the place, first showing him heading west, then south, then west again. At one point, the system placed him 60 miles inland, on a stretch of road that didn't exist anymore. Patrol was sent to look, found nothing but dirt and fence posts. Around midnight, a rancher named Miguel Luna found Rivas wandering barefoot down his gravel driveway, uniform torn, skin blistered like he'd been walking in the sun for days. He was mumbling, dry-mouthed, eyes wild. It took 4 hours to calm him down enough to talk, and what he said chilled every man in that room to the bone. Rivas claimed he pulled up to the black sedan just like normal. Nobody inside. Looked like the car had been abandoned for a while. He radioed it in, but no one answered. Figured the tower was acting up. Happens sometimes out there. He turned back toward his cruiser, planning to check the trunk of the abandoned car one more time before calling in the tow. That's when he noticed something strange. The road behind him, it didn't look like the one he'd driven in on. No landmarks, no road signs. The sky had this dull, gray-brown tint, like it couldn't decide if it was sunrise or dusk. He got in his car, turned the key. It started just fine. So he drove, and drove, and drove. He said the miles stretched like rubber. The road never curved, never bent. Just 2 lanes of worn pavement between miles and miles of dry scrubland and those ugly, gnarled mesquite trees, each one standing too close to the shoulder, like they were watching. The radio didn't work. His phone was dead. The GPS showed only static. And then he saw it. Headlights in the rearview mirror. At first it was far back, just a glimmer, but the longer he drove, the closer it got. Every time he glanced back, it had moved up another few car lengths. He couldn't make out the make or model, couldn't even see a driver, just 2 yellow-white beams bearing down on him like a predator that never blinked. He accelerated, so did the car behind him. He tried slamming on the brakes, so did the car behind him. It mimicked him, matched every move, never passed, never backed off, just stayed there, closer, closer. At one point, he swore he saw a face in the rearview mirror, pale, smiling, no eyes, just black sockets where the pupils should have been, like holes bored straight into the back of its skull. He drove until he felt like his heart was going to explode. The gas tank never emptied. The clock on the dash blinked 4:07 p.m. the entire time. He passed the same dead armadillo on the road 7 times. The same billboard, half rotted and sun-bleached, advertising a mechanic shop that had burned down in 1996. Eventually, he said he stopped trying to escape and just pulled over, shut the car off, sat in the silence, waiting for the thing to come, closer, waiting for the door to open, waiting for whatever it was to get in the front seat, but it never did. Instead, he woke up in the dirt. No car, no road, just a mouthful of gravel and the sound of cicadas humming in the dark. When officers went back to the last known location, they found the black sedan. It was rusted out. License plates traced back to a missing person case from 1974. The car had been sitting there for decades. There was no sign of Rivas's cruiser, no tire marks, nothing. He never went back on patrol. Took early retirement, moved north to stay with his sister. Sometimes people say they see him sitting on the porch at night, staring at the road like he's waiting for something to crawl out of the dark. But here's the kicker. Every few years, a rookie gets sent out to FM 666, and sometimes, just sometimes, they come back saying the same thing. They drove for hours, days even. No signs, no exits, and someone was always behind them. Some stories rot in the corners of memory like forgotten bread in the back of a pantry, black, wet, and crawling. They aren't whispered around campfires or passed down through generations. They just sit there, quietly pulsing under the surface of places people don't talk about. The Travis County Jail is one of those places. It's not the oldest jail in Texas, not by a long shot. But the bones of the place go deep, deeper than most would like to admit. The building sits on top of older foundations, older corridors, and tunnels that time and bureaucracy forgot. Layers of bad history laid over worse history like a shroud. The year was 1997. Clinton was president. Gas was cheap, and down on the night shift in Travis County Jail, something was laughing. Every Thursday morning at precisely 3:17 a.m., a noise would echo through the ventilation system. Low at first, like the dragging of metal chains over concrete, then rising into something far worse. A laugh. Not a man's laugh. Not really. Not even a lunatic's. But something wrong. It sounded like someone trying to imitate a laugh, like something that had only heard it secondhand. It was guttural, gurgling, sharp at the edges like broken glass, and no matter what wing you were in, A block, D block, solitary, you could hear it. The metal air vents would hum and rattle, and then it would start, just for 30 seconds, every Thursday. At first the guards thought it was a prank, inmates messing with the PA system, so they swept the place. Nothing. No unauthorized access, no tampering. Then they thought maybe it was one of the inmates, some nut job with perfect timing. So they locked down blocks during the exact minute. They even moved prisoners around. Still, the laughing came. Always 3:17. Always the same terrible rhythm. A low, choking chuckle that swelled into maniacal shrieking. And then, silence. As if someone flipped a switch. Word spread fast. Some inmates refused to sleep on Wednesdays. Others carved crude symbols into their beds, their arms, the walls, things they claimed would ward it off. One even bit off his own tongue to keep from laughing back. Said it liked when people laughed along. The guards didn't fare much better. Veterans of the department started swapping shifts to avoid the Thursday morning curse. A few of them quit. One, Officer Kenton Ruiz, put a gun in his mouth 2 hours after a double shift on a Thursday. Left behind a note with only 3 words. It sees me. Still, the sound persisted, so the department brought in a tech crew, wired the place up with fresh microphones, brand new audio recorders. They caught it. The laugh. You could see the Texas faces go pale as the recording played back on a loop in the evidence room. It started with the hum, then the wet gurgle, then the shriek. The audio engineer, some poor bastard from UT named Donnie Chase, quit on the spot. He told a reporter later it didn't sound like a laugh when you slowed it down. He said it sounded like a voice, speaking backward. He wouldn't repeat what he thought it said. The tape didn't last long anyway. It caught fire in the evidence room a few nights later. No explanation. The building didn't burn, no electrical shorts, no chemicals near it. Just the cassette itself, a melted lump of plastic in the middle of the steel filing cabinet. Security footage showed the drawer open by itself at 3:17 a.m. That was when the department decided to stop investigating. They sealed off several vents, closed down the East Wing for renovations, moved the most vocal inmates to different facilities. They stopped talking about it officially, but off the record, every single Thursday, You could still find guards glancing nervously at the vents. The only one who ever really tried to figure it out was a lifer named DeMarcus Hayes. He was doing 40 years for armed robbery and aggravated assault. He spent most of his time drawing pictures with pencil stubs on legal pads, mostly of faces, or what looked like faces. But the eyes were always wrong. Too many, or too black, or not there at all. One day he showed a guard a drawing. "You know what that is?" he asked. The guard didn't. It was just a tangle of shadows and shapes. Looked like a man curled up inside a vent shaft, mouth open way too wide, teeth like nails. DeMarcus tapped the page. "That's him," he said. "The laughing man." "Who?" "The one in the walls. He was here before all of us. And he ain't leaving." DeMarcus was found dead the next morning. No marks, no struggle, just sitting on his bunk with his mouth open in a silent scream. Both eardrums ruptured. His cell stank of burnt copper and ozone. The legal pad with the drawing? Gone. Not misplaced? Gone. Like it never existed. To this day, the jail logs unexplained noise disturbances in the early hours of Thursday morning. Nobody calls it what it is anymore. Not in writing, but the guards still know. And if you happen to find yourself locked up in Travis County on a Wednesday night, you'll know too. Because around 3:17 a.m., the walls will start to hum, and then you'll hear it. A laugh that's not a laugh at all. Something old. Something hungry. Something that knows your name and the last secret you ever told. And God help you if you ever laugh back. It came in at 2:42 a.m., quiet as a whisper in the ear of a corpse. A 911 dispatcher named Carla Ruiz answered the line, expecting the usual drunken fights, domestic calls, maybe a wreck off the freeway. But what she heard was the small, trembling voice of a little girl. "He's in my room," the voice said, barely audible, shaky, like she was covering the receiver with her hand. "He's watching me." Carla straightened in her chair and motioned to the supervisor. "What's your name, sweetheart?" she asked, a pause, then a whisper. "Lily." Carla typed the response in. The supervisor leaned over her shoulder, watching. The voice had the high, breathless pitch of a child too afraid to cry. "He's in the corner. He's smiling. I want mommy." The line crackled. Static buzzed for a second like an old TV tuning into something it shouldn't. "Lily, where are you?" Carla asked. Another pause. Then, "My house. The trailer." "Which trailer, sweetheart? Can you tell me where?" Another burst of static. And then one word. One name. Beaumont. Corpus has a stretch of old trailers out near Beaumont Street, not far from the shipyards. Most of them are dead husks now. Tin walls blistered from the sun, windows blacked out or smashed. Cops avoid the area unless they're dragging someone out of a meth den, but Carla had a job to do, and a scared little girl on the line. She flagged the call for urgent response. Officers Ramirez and Holcomb were already patrolling nearby and swung around within minutes. The trailer they found sat half sunken in the dirt, surrounded by weeds and rusted bikes. No lights, no tire tracks, just dust and silence. Still, the front door was open, just an inch. The two officers announced themselves. No answer. Holcomb stepped inside first. Ramirez followed, flashlight sweeping across rotted furniture, empty beer cans and stained carpeting that hadn't seen a vacuum since the early 2000s. Then Ramirez gagged. The smell hit them both, the kind of heavy, sweet rot that means something's long dead, but not recent. No, this was old, dried into the bones of the place. They followed it to a back room, a child's bedroom, still painted pink, though the paint peeled in long, curling strips. A tiny bed sat in the corner with stuffed animals, grimy, gray with dust, and on the bed was a shape. They found a skeleton wrapped in what looked like a faded pink blanket. The bones were small, a girl maybe 8 or 9 years old, a cracked skull, fingers curled up like she died holding on to something. Ramirez backed out. Holcomb stared for a moment, stunned. His flashlight trembled just a bit in his hand. The little girl had been dead a long time. CSI was called. Carla, shaken, stayed on the line until the officers reported what they'd found. And then she sat back in her chair and nearly vomited. Because the name Lily sounded familiar. She searched the system. Lily Ann Harper, age 9, reported missing June 3, 2002. Last seen playing in her front yard on Beaumont Street. The case was closed 2 years later. Presumed runaway. The mother overdosed in 2006. No living family. No one ever followed up. But the call Carla had just received had come from Lily's phone, a cheap plastic flip phone left on the bedside table next to the bones. A phone with no SIM card, no battery. It had rusted through. The number hadn't existed in years. Still, the audio was there. The call was real, and that wasn't the end of it. In the days that followed, the tape from the 911 call was played back by investigators. Clean signal, little girl whispering, but something else was under it. A low hum, a voice behind hers. Raspy, male. You had to turn the volume up to hear it, but once you did, you couldn't unhear it. "She's mine," it said, over and over. "She's mine, she's mine, she's mine." The tape corrupted the system, froze terminals, triggered alarms that weren't connected. It had to do a full shutdown. When they restarted the system, the audio file was gone. Only one officer, Holcomb, tried to push the investigation further. He swore he'd seen something in the corner of the little girl's room when he entered. A shape, tall with long arms, crouching where a closet door hung open. He said he felt a pressure in his head, like someone holding both sides of his skull and pushing inward. He started drinking again. Eventually, he requested reassignment. Moved out of state. Last anyone heard, he was living in Nevada under a new name. As for the trailer, it burned down a week later. No one claimed responsibility. No suspects, no clear ignition point, just a flash fire that gutted it from the inside out, like the house wanted to die. The lot's still empty now, a flat square of scorched earth and busted fence line. But every now and then, usually late at night, dispatch gets another call. Always a whisper, always from an untraceable number, and always the same message. "He's in my room, he's smiling. I want mommy." San Angelo had always been the kind of town where nothing much happened past midnight. Just the wind scraping across cracked pavement, the occasional tumbleweed bouncing through empty streets, and the distant hum of the oil fields working there. Endless grind. Patrolman Roy Jenkins had known those roads like the back of his hand, worn down by years of late-night shifts and boredom so thick you could slice it with a knife. That night, the air was heavy. The heat lingered like a bad memory, and the sky was a blank slate of black, untouched by stars. Roy's cruiser rolled steady, its tires humming along the highway like a low heartbeat. At first, everything was normal. Dispatch calls were quiet, the only sound his own breath and the occasional crackle of the radio. He ran a routine check on an old farmhouse, nothing but silence and shadows. Then, out of nowhere, something caught his eye. A flash of red and blue on the roadside. A patrol car. Same make, same model, same worn paint job. Badge number 276 glinted in the moonlight. Roy blinked, squinting through the windshield. There shouldn't have been another cruiser on this stretch of road, not at that hour. He slowed down, curiosity sharpening his senses. The other cruiser sat parked, lights flashing in that rhythmic pattern that meant, "Pull over." A standard call for a traffic stop. Roy's fingers tightened around the steering wheel. A cold knot of unease settled in his stomach, but training kicked in. He flicked on his own lights and pulled over. As he rolled to a stop behind the other vehicle, he saw the driver's side window begin to lower. And then, the impossible. The face behind the wheel was his own. Same tired eyes staring out. Same jaw, clenched tight. Same faint crease in his forehead, the one he'd never noticed until now. Roy's breath caught. His heart hammered in his chest, loud enough to drown out the hum of the engine. He reached for the mic, but his voice was gone. Instead, he sat frozen, watching the other Roy climb out of the car. The steps were deliberate, slow, like a man moving underwater. The moonlight bounced off the other Roy's uniform, the badge shining with an unnatural gleam. Roy watched as his doppelganger circled his own cruiser, then slid the driver's door open and climbed inside. The window rolled up, sealing the other, Roy in the car like a ghost trapped in glass. Roy stared, frozen, as the other cruiser's lights winked off, and the car pulled away down the dark road, disappearing into the night like a shadow swallowed by fog. The silence that followed was suffocating. Roy sat there for a long time, his hands trembling on the wheel. The radio crackled with static, but no one answered his calls. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. He fumbled for his dash cam, hoping for some proof, some explanation. The small red light blinked steadily, recording. But when he rewound the tape, later at the station, the footage of the other cruiser pulling him over was missing. Gone. All that remained was a single frame, a blurry image of two patrol cars parked side by side, and in each window, his own face staring back. Roy tried to brush it off, maybe exhaustion, hallucination, or a prank. But that night, something inside him snapped. He couldn't shake the feeling that the other him was still out there, somewhere watching. He started hearing whispers over the radio, faint, distorted voices repeating his badge number, calling out to him from dead frequencies. He felt eyes on him, shadows moving just beyond the streetlights. His sleep was haunted by dreams of endless roads and mirrored cars, where he chased himself into darkness. The next morning, Roy handed in his badge. He left town without a word. Some say he vanished into the desert, trying to outrun the other version of himself. Others say the real Roy Jenkins still walks the streets of San Angelo at night, listening for a call he'll never answer. But the dash cam footage, it vanished, erased like it never existed. All that remains is the memory of a cop who pulled himself over. And the chilling question, if you saw your own face in the window of a cruiser on a lonely road, who would you be? The desert night settled over El Paso like a velvet shroud, heavy and still, broken only by the distant hum of passing cars and the occasional bark of a stray dog. The air was thick with dust and heat that refused to leave even after the sun dipped behind the rugged mountains. It was the kind of night where the past felt alive, whispering just beneath the surface, waiting to be heard. Officer Miguel Ramos sat behind the wheel of his patrol car, eyes scanning the cracked streets as he sipped lukewarm coffee. A routine night patrol, nothing new, until the call came in over the radio, sharp and urgent. Hostage situation, 4212 East Fannin Street. A man with a gun had barricaded himself inside one of the rundown apartments. The dispatcher's voice was tight, controlled, but the tension was clear. Miguel knew that address. He'd been there years before, responding to another call, a similar one, with shots fired, lives shattered. When the squad arrived, the neighborhood was silent, save for the low murmur of a frightened child crying somewhere inside the building. The apartment complex was a faded relic, paint peeling from wood like dead skin, windows grimy and cracked. The kind of place where time stopped and memories lingered like ghosts. Miguel and the others moved cautiously, weapons drawn. They could hear the man inside, shouting incoherent threats, his voice rising and falling like a broken record. Then, suddenly, the door burst open. There he was, big, broad-shouldered, wild-eyed, scar running down his left cheek, tattoos crawling up his arms, snakes winding through skulls, a jagged star on his wrist. The man charged, gun raised, fury blazing in his eyes. The officers fired. Gunshots echoed like thunder in the narrow hallways. When the smoke cleared, the man lay on the floor, still as death, blood pooling beneath him. Miguel knelt beside the body, his breath catching in his throat, because the face staring back at him was not new. It was the same face, same scars, same tattoos, same birth date. The files confirmed it. 12 years ago, at the very same address, a man matching this description had been shot dead during a hostage standoff. His body had never been claimed, left to rot in the morgue until it was buried in a potter's field. No family, no friends, and now, here he was again, lying dead in the same hallway. Miguel's hand trembled as he radioed for backup, for forensic, for anything that could explain what the hell was happening. But there was no explanation. The autopsy was the same as before. Gunshot wounds, cause of death listed clearly on the report, yet the fingerprints matched the man from 12 years prior. DNA tests confirmed it. Impossible. How could this man be alive? Or was he? Rumors started like wildfire through the department. Some said the first man had been cursed, bound to the building, by some terrible sin or secret. Others whispered of dark magic, a soul trapped between life and death, unable to move on. Officers who had responded to both calls swore they saw the man walking the streets late at night, ghost-like, eyes hollow, yet burning with pain. Miguel started having nightmares. The man's eyes appeared in his dreams, cold and accusing. Whispers followed him home, scratching at his windows in the dead of night. One night, alone at the precinct, the radio crackled to life on a silent channel. A voice, faint but unmistakable, repeated his badge number. Over and over, Miguel's. Hands shook as he reached for the mic, but the voice vanished. Days later, a janitor found scratches etched into the wall of the abandoned apartment. Numbers, dates, a name. Jesse. No one knew who Jesse was, but everyone knew the feeling of being watched. The department tried to close the case, label it a coincidence, a tragic repeat, but the shadow lingered. Years passed. The building was finally torn down, but officers reported, feeling uneasy whenever they drove past the empty lot. Miguel never returned to that part of town. Some say he left El Paso altogether, unable to escape the man who wouldn't die, the one who returned to claim the night again and again, because some things refuse to stay buried, and some souls are cursed to walk the earth, tethered by scars, ink, and a date on a faded birth certificate, the man who wouldn't die. The thin man in the evidence room, Dallas, TX late nights at the Dallas Police Department carried a certain weight, an oppressive silence that settled like dust over empty desks, cold coffee cups, and half-finished paperwork. The hall smelled, faintly of old vinyl, dust, and the lingering sweat of worn uniforms. The kind of smell that seemed to cling to your skin and never quite wash away. Detective Laura Briggs had been here many times before. Alone, long after the last patrol car had rolled out, the streets emptied, and the city breathed quietly beneath a veil of darkness. She was no stranger to the lonely hours when the world outside seemed paused, waiting for something to break the stillness. Tonight, the evidence room was her domain. She sat behind a metal desk, eyes weary but sharp, filing the latest reports from an unsolved homicide case. The crime scene was months old now, the trail cold, the killer still out there somewhere. The files cluttered around her like ghosts of unanswered questions. As the clock ticked toward 1 a.m., she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye, a shadow lingering near the row of lockers where officers stashed their gear after long shifts. At first, she thought it was a trick of the flickering fluorescent lights, but then she saw him, a tall, impossibly thin man, standing perfectly still, his uniform faded and stained with the kind of wear only decades could give. His patrol gear was outdated, an old Dallas PD uniform from the late 70s or early 80s, complete with brass buttons dulled by time. His face was pale and gaunt, eyes hollow, like deep black wells reflecting nothing but endless night. Laura's breath caught in her throat. The man didn't blink or move. He simply watched, unmoving, an unreadable expression etched onto his face. She rubbed her eyes, blinking hard, telling herself it was exhaustion. When she looked again, He was gone. Word spread quickly. The officers who worked late began whispering about the Thin Man, a spectral figure appearing in the evidence room at the witching hour, always near the lockers, always watching. Stranger. Still, every sighting seemed to coincide with a failure in the evidence chain. Important case files vanished. Physical evidence, guns, clothing, photographs, disappeared mysteriously. Unsolved homicide cases saw their leads dry up overnight. Detective Briggs grew obsessed. She stayed late, night after night, sifting through old records, searching for the origin of the uniform, trying to unearth the story behind the ghost. Her research led her to Officer James Mallory. Mallory was a promising young cop who died in the line of duty exactly 30 years ago, in 1989. His body was found inside the very evidence room Laura haunted now, his throat slashed, a single bullet wound to the chest, but no suspects ever found. The case went cold, the department never speaking of it openly. Mallory's gear was stored away, relics locked in a dusty cabinet no one dared to open. Laura wondered if the Thin Man was Mallory, trapped in the department, bound to the place of his death. Late one night, she heard the creak of the lockers.
Again slow and deliberate, as if someone, or something, was pacing just beyond her sight. The room's temperature dropped, cold seeping into her bones. She saw the Thin Man step out of the shadows, closer now, his eyes fixed on hers. His mouth
Opened, but no sound came out, just a silence heavier than the night. "Why are you here?" Laura whispered, voice trembling. He tilted his head, as if confused, and then vanished as the lights flickered violently and died. When the emergency backup lights blinked on, Laura was gone. All that remained were her badge and gun, carefully placed on the evidence counter. The department launched a search, but Laura was never found. Some officers swear that on certain nights, when the evidence room is empty, you can hear soft footsteps echoing down the hall. Slow, dragging, deliberate. And sometimes, if you're unlucky enough to be alone, you'll catch a glimpse of the Thin Man watching, waiting. He's said to haunt not just the evidence room, but the very files themselves. Case notes disappear, interviews are lost, leads vanish like smoke, because James Mallory's story never ended with his death. Some say the Thin Man is looking for justice, his own and that of the cases left cold in the department. Others whisper that he's something darker, a shadow feeding on failure, growing stronger with every lost clue, every broken case. No one dares confront him directly, and every officer who works late after dark knows the unspoken rule: never linger in the evidence room alone. Because some ghosts don't just haunt, they consume. And the Thin Man is still here, tall and thin, his hollow eyes watching every move, waiting for the next mistake.